In that last segment, we began our conversation about bringing correctional industry folks together with workforce development folks to begin having discussions at the table and begin exploring ways that they can begin collaborative efforts and take a systems approach that basically leverages resources. And it seems to me, Pat, that the beginning of those conversations often leads to dispelling the myths and misconceptions about correctional industries. In the opening, just listening to Robert, suddenly it occurred to me that one of the myths and misconceptions that we dispelled was that correctional industries is all about license plates and furniture making, and it's not all that sophisticated, and in fact it really is very sophisticated. What are some of the other myths and misconceptions about correctional industries that we need to dispel?
Well, Catherine, I'm really excited that this is part of this dialogue because, as we mentioned earlier, correctional industries has been very self-contained and hasn't gone public with basically what it does. We're very busy going about the business of doing business. And you'll hear, and Robert mentioned about factories behind fences, business behind bars, cheap labor, and unfair competition. So I think this is a great opportunity to talk a little bit about that. Correctional industries was the initial model of social entrepreneurship. The truth about correctional industries is that we do not hire offenders to make products. We make products so that we can provide offenders with real-world work experience. Where the business model comes into this, and this is what makes us so distinguishingly different from other social programs, is that we're self-funded. So that's where the business side comes in. To be self-funded, you have to operate on a model that can fund itself. So all of our correctional industry programs have a double bottom line. We have a program side where we are required to have program expectations, occupational skills training, but then we also have the business expectations, the self-funding, generating revenue to make sure that we can operate the programs, which makes us very, very different and very unique. Another myth is about the cheap labor and unfair competition. I think we need to dispel the myth that it is not inexpensive to operate and manufacture products in a prison setting. There are many barriers to operating industries in prisons, and Don Guillory is going to talk a little bit more about that later. But when we have partnerships with private sector companies, it is because the private sector company has a true need for something that we can fulfill, something that they can't find anywhere else. And successful partnerships are where it's a win-win situation for everyone, not just the company, but it's also for the offenders. It's the occupational skills training that they receive. It's the access to private sector expectations, what it's going to be like to work in the real world, which really makes us it's a great initiative for both industries, the partner, and the inmate.
You said it well when you said that we're so busy doing the business of correctional industries that you don't often have as much time as you need and enough resources really to promote what you do. And when people see a feature like the last one we just saw in correctional industries, they say, wow, that's great. These incarcerated offenders get to have job skills. And maybe that's not the sell for the public, because we know we're in a time when people are, let's get tough on criminals, let's give them bread and water, and we don't care if they get usable work skills. But you know, maybe that's not the sell, but the benefits economically and socially of correctional industries is where the big sell is. Let's start first with the economic benefits of correctional industries.
Absolutely, and the economic benefits are so widespread. First of all, correctional industries as an industry nationwide last year spent over $1.2 billion purchasing raw materials and supplies. Now those were purchased from local businesses, and that money cannot help but trickle down into your local communities. This money is not going offshore. These products are not being made offshore. $1.2 billion that we are funneling to local business. That is significant. We also reduced the cost of programming for the government. Self-funding, operating on the business model. They don't pay for what we do. We're also a really great solution provider for government. Because we are all part of government, we know government better than anyone else. And having the inmates as a part of that, they're helping the government. So, and as far as working with private sector partners to fulfill some of their needs, very often when they partner with correctional industries, we are keeping civilian staff and work in this country because we are a great alternative to going offshore. Studies do show that participating in correctional industries and then employment after release is a critical factor in not coming back to prison. And when your national average is $20,000 a year for every inmate that spends time in prison, you start multiplying that. That's very significant economic.
Well, you multiply it by 2 million prisoners, and then you know that's pretty expensive. If you can reduce that by the number of people who've been in correctional industries, the savings is pretty significant on reincarceration. I would imagine.
It absolutely is. And I'd like us to take a minute now and listen to some comments from a private sector partner who has been involved in correctional industries for over a decade and a former commissioner of correction.
When we started out in this program in 1996, we had a lot of orders, and we were having trouble keeping up with those orders, mostly because we were trying to run second, third shifts in our plants, and we just were having difficulty getting enough qualified people to do that. And so for the first several years, what I was trying to do was to just do inside the prison what we were doing outside the prison. And then somewhere along the line, you know, it occurred to me that there were things that you could do inside the prison that you could not do outside the prison. And so we developed some products that were more labor intensive to get looks and things, more of a handmade look for our wood flooring. And these really found a place in the market. And at a time when a lot of companies in the furniture industry, the textile industry, and also the wood flooring industry were losing business to overseas competition, our business has more than doubled in size. And it's probably 4 times as big. And so we have increased our population inside the prison, doing a very specific part of the work. But it's also all the other things that support that, which was done by civilian labor, that's also grown. So we've doubled the size of our civilian workforce as well, at the same time that we've been able to do this inside the prison. So it's been good for business, it's been good for our employees, and I think it's been good for the inmates, and it's also been good for the state. It's what you would call a win-win-win-win.
Within the prison structure itself, correctional industries probably provides close to $3.4 million a year in return on investment back to the prison system. And that's $3,400, you know, for every inmate per year, and you multiply that by 1,000. And it's just amazing in terms of overall program dollars that are saved at the correctional department for that reason.